Hey, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. This is Chris, and today we're doing this fabulous sketchpad video conversation about mind clarity, the cause and effect, and making sure we don't get confused in life. So let's go through it and kick off right away. Consider yourself or your mind. It's like the dashboard of a car, and there are instruments to tell you where you're at and where you're going. And I think this is really important to recognize. And these instruments are really instruments that determine where you're at in relation to your personal values. And I've only written here 4 of those values: your wealth value, your family value, your health value, and your career. And the different sizes of these dials has nothing to do at all with anything collective. It's your individuality. And the wealth one here that I've shown could actually be for you family, and for you health. The little one over there written health could be actually your wealth. And so each individual has a thumbprint specific set of values, and this is really important stuff to understand. You can even have a tiny weeny little one down there in career. It could be unimportant, or you could have it. You could even have a family as tiny weeny. It's really, there isn't any idiosyncratic or generic set of values for anybody. The difficulty comes is when we get a conflict of interest between our different value sets. For example, we might be going to buy a new car, and on our wealth value, that's a poor decision. It's a really poor decision. On our family value up there, it might be a brilliant decision because, wow, we all need a family car. So now I've got my value for family and my value for wealth creation in conflict. Having a new car, or this particular car, it might be a fairly good decision for health because we could go away on holidays. But from a career point of view, it's going to put me under a lot of stress. So these values, values can chop and change depending on the decision. You might say, let's buy a bigger car, and again, it's still poor, but from the family point of view, it's not so easy to get around town, so it's an average decision. From a health point of view, it gets better because we can go away with friends, and from a career point of view, you can say, well, it's a very fancy car and it does my career a lot of good to be seen in a very fancy car. So you can see how your values and how you interpret a decision toward each value can really get you confused. You can see how in each one. Now, you can also start getting confused, and what I'm talking about here is the low-hanging fruit. You can also suddenly think, well, my career is more important than I used to think it was, and therefore the decision is more than excellent. Because I really want to use this vehicle to promote me as a high-powered executive. You can get a divorce, and all of a sudden whether the family likes your new car or not, becomes irrelevant. And that's exactly what happened to me when I bought my post-divorce Porsche at massive cost to everybody. And so these values can shift around. So what's important to know is not only do values change, but our emotions change with our values. And this is the picture of your mind. And the different stress levels that you can be under to make a decision and you can be like, you need to make it urgently, or you've got plenty of time to make it, or it's a make and break decision, or it's just something that you need to get sorted. So your mindset in relation to the decision plus your values becomes important here. The next thing to recognize is there is actually 7 values, and to know your values, you need to go around each of these areas of life and work out which you would prioritize if you were making a decision. And they don't change. They're always the same. Your values hierarchy is never different, but you can manipulate information into yourself to say, well, this is good for my career. even when it isn't. So we can actually play tricks and mind games with ourselves and say, buying this Volkswagen Combi van is a really good thing for my health, because one day, someday, I might be able to put a surfboard in the back and go to the beach, which you're never going to do. But what you've done is leverage the value of health in the purchasing decision, and so therefore projected something onto the combi van that it never really had and never probably will have. So the next part of this is to realize that there are things called performance development or magnifiers, amplifiers, and that when we're not balanced in our self-leadership on a daily basis, our mind can get confused as to what value comes when, and we can get really upset with our own feelings. So you can see that there are many variables in decision making that can impact us, especially when the decision crosses over the boundaries between health and relationship and family and wealth and money and career and all the different areas of life. A totally stressed decision is when you say, I've got to make it. So when we're under the pump and we say, I've got to make this decision now, if you hear yourself say that, you are a long, long, long way from a wise decision. That's a red flag. The next thing is when a decision is going to have a huge cost and it's way more than your perceived valence. In other words, if it said, another example might be cost is not always financial, but it might be, I want to run 2 marathons back to back, one day after the other, but my capacity at the present time is to run 10 kilometers. When you put yourself into that decision and you get out of balance in that equation, you really are not going to make anything anywhere near a wise decision, because your perception of your capability or your income or your available energy and your perception of the task at hand will be out of balance, and then you'll go back into that got-to state of mind. The next one is when you hear yourself say, I should do this. And that is, again, projecting onto yourself the morals and ethics of other people's happiness. And this is a really, really poisonous place to be, where you say, this is what I should do. And typically you're trying to please someone else. And if you can, it would be wise to listen to my recent podcast on the concept of pleasing people. It explains this really clearly. And especially when you hear the word should or shouldn't, you know that you're dealing with other people's values in your choice making. One of the things that can happen really easily when we get into the idea of pleasing other people, we can start to shift the balance point of our decision making, and we can say, well, I'd love to do it even though I shouldn't. And so we actually shift the balance point way over. So very small amount of benefit, very small amount of privilege way outweighs, because the scales are tipped way over, way outweighs what we should and shouldn't do. And this is mind tricks that we use quite often to make very bad decisions. When we start using other people's values, it becomes really dangerous, because typically your values need to be the criteria on which you base decisions, because that makes those decisions sustainable. But other people will project their opinions. And when other people are saying this is what you should do or this is what you shouldn't do, and you haven't invited them to do it, they're actually saying from their value set, this is how I would make that decision. But their value set can't be your value set. And that's often very difficult in a relationship as well, because you and your partner have extraordinarily different values. And whether you like that or not, that's just the way it is. And quite often, one of you might be asked to compromise. And I think that that's a really dangerous place in any form of relationship. I always coach my clients not to compromise their values in a relationship, because you lose self-respect and ultimately the respect of your partner. What people do very often with these values, other people's values, people they get closer and closer to a friend. And so they say, I really need to talk to you about this, something very, very personal. And they bring people close in order to, in some ways, reinforce their own values. So friends typically are people who agree with your values. They agree with your mindset. And enemies are people who disagree. So we when we're making decisions, we quite often try to incubate or isolate ourselves from people who won't agree with us, and we try to surround ourselves with people who do agree with us. Again, this is really unwise stuff, because what people will say out loud and what they will validate in you in order to get your approval or get you to like them or get you to be their friend is quite often quite corrupt. And that's not a criticism of human nature. What it is just the reality of it. Let's keep going here. Solutions. And I think to dish up problems without solutions is really unfair on my part. The first solution to this clear mindset and to make decisions based on your own set of values, number one, is to know your values. And in the coaching we do, there are 13 questions that I deliver to you. There's a grid that I deliver to you, and I ask you, what are your values? We learn from that your intrinsic and extrinsic values, and from that you can say, I know me. I know what my priority is. And if you know your priority and you come to a confusion, always know that you've slipped off your own priorities, because when a decision becomes confusing, I say, if you really are in your value set, you don't need to make decisions. You just automatically come to conclusions. And sometimes we might take our lowest value and be interpreting whether we should buy a lounge suite or whether we should buy a car based on our lowest value. And that will mean a decision. And if we base that, if we were thinking about buying the car on our highest value, we would draw an automatic conclusion. There would be no confusion. I think know your performance multipliers. We've talked about this many times over the last couple of days and weeks about performance multipliers. We look at here on the Back on Track. These are the 6 performance multipliers I use. In the discard form, it's to make sure you move past any judgments and emotions that you're stuck on. At a cellular level, make sure that you're working on your cellular strength and getting blood tests and doing things that keep your blood nice and clean and your body available for thinking and clarity. With your brand, make sure you get out into nature and surround yourself with things that are beautiful and entice you to think at a high level in a love to rather than a got to. In mindset, I talk about prioritization. People who work on their high priorities make really wise decisions. People who work on their low priorities attract calamities, disasters, and humbling circumstances. So the mindset is just really low-hanging fruit. It's really easy to be able to say, I'm going to work on my highest priorities. What are they? Well, your highest priorities are things that you can really see that if you do them enough, you will get what you want in life. Your vision is your imagination, and your ability to dream or idealize or project yourself out into the future is what really causes willpower. And this willpower, quite often mistaken for hard-headedness, this willpower is where certainty comes from. And certainty is not certainty of outcome. Certainty is certainty of process. That what you're doing today is actually working you towards where you want to go. If you meet a depressed person, they're depressed because they have no certainty that what they're doing today will improve their day tomorrow. Finally, self-talk. You know, in self-talk, in terms of performance multipliers, the two greatest performance multipliers, I believe, are brand, which means the environment you put yourself into, your sleep, your diet, all the things. And self-talk is the way you speak to yourself. And the ideal way is to speak to yourself like a good coach would. And a good coach would say, what are you doing right? What's the drawback? What are you doing wrong? What's the benefit? What self-talk would, if you take it on board as being self-coaching and self-leadership, self-talk both supports and challenges you. So it doesn't build you up so you fall. It doesn't build you down so you have to climb out of the pit all the time. So that's the loop. And I think we need to practice this these performance multipliers on a daily basis, because they grow and they can really influence the outcome with very little cost of time. So know your mind. When you're making decisions, you hear yourself think, and are you saying, do I love this thing, or do I got to have it? Should I have it? Need to have it? Want to have it? If you're saying should, you're using someone else's value set. Could even be your coach's value set or your partner's value set to buy it. I should buy that. Or got to, you're using time limits, which are really unwise because they put you into a very extremely unhealthy state of mind. Need to means you've dropped into your emotional baggage, and your emotional baggage is going to fluctuate from left to right to left to right, because it will go, as we've already talked about in this audio, it will go round and round the value set, considering whether you should buy the lounge suite or the car or change jobs, based on different values at different times of the day. So in the morning you might say, I really value my kids and my family. I wonder if I should buy that car. Yes, I should. Then it comes to lunchtime, and at lunchtime you might be working on your wealth creation. You go, should I buy that car or shouldn't I? Oh, hang on, I need it. I need that car. I need to make a decision. I need that car. Oh, I don't need to buy that car because I need to make money. And so going around the dashboard throughout the process of the day moves you into different emotional states on decision making. So once again, you've got to know your emotional state so that you make decisions at least in a love to, choose to, or desire to space. The rest, it's going to fluctuate, and you'll get buyer's remorse on whatever you buy. So last but not least, just know where you're going. And it's really important that every decision leads you in the direction of where you'd love to be in the next few years. So if you're buying a car or a lounge, or you're buying a table, or you're buying or thinking about changing jobs or investing in shares, just ask yourself before you do, where do I want to end up? And am I really clear about that? And how does this thing I'm about to buy help me get there? If you're thinking about investing in property, for example, and you're about to buy a fancy dining table, you might say, how does this fancy dining table get me an investment in my property or get me financial security? And if the answer is by spending $3,000 or $4,000 on a fancy dining table, you end up with $3,000 or $4,000 you haven't got. You can't sell the dining table because they're worthless secondhand. And now you've lost $4,000 of investment cash. So you say, I want to be a property owner in the next 2 to 3 years, and I need that cash to buy a property. So therefore, I'm better off buying some wooden pallets and a stump to eat my breakfast on, and be able to put more money into the investment property that I'd like to buy. Or I'd like to take the kids on a holiday, and how would that car really, will it change the holiday, or is it just cosmetic dressing for me around that topic? And so it's really important to know where you want to end up in a couple of years, and have a single, very clear focal point, and link all your decisions to that end. So, mind clarity, cause and effect. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, share it around. We're working really strongly in this 45-day period to develop the power of your intuition. It's one of the most essential pieces of your human nature that you will use as a leader in any field or sport or community service. You need to be able to tap into and have the power of your intuition on board as one of your great assets in moving forward. And mind clarity, decision making, is one of the, let's say, platforms on which your intuition can sit. This is Chris. You have a beautiful day. Bye for now.